Good evening, everybody, and welcome to some stat check bonus content. I am Innes Wilson, and I am joined by absolutely nobody because this is the deranged propositions and madnesses of my brain. Here to bring you a review of sorts of week one of the Grotmas calendar. I believe Sunday last week was the first day, so day one of the 24 days of this. It's now day 8. We just today had the Imperial Agents and Custodes release. So I'll be going through everything from day 1 to 8 in sort of I'm going to try to make it sort of a bite-sized format. I'm going to be aiming to spend about 5 minutes on each attachment, kind of talking about the highlights, the what's interesting, how they stack up power level compared to each other, compared to the rest of the detachments in their books. Obviously, we're missing the context of all 24 of the detachments, as well as the balanced data slate that's due sometime this month. But we do have a lot of information about each of the relevant attachments, what kind of is making them tick, what seems to be the cool synergies and combos for each one. So I kind of wanted to just spend 10 minutes on each attachment, running through them and going for kind of like an overview of where their power lies, where their weaknesses lie, what data sheets are going to be interesting, and the ones that I think are the most worth exploring in each of those attachments, and then a sample list for each of them. So I've taken the time to sit and write up a list for each of them. I've played a few of them. Specifically, I played a game with Starshatter and Flyblown host, both of which I was fairly impressed with, as we'll get to as we go through the detachments. There are 29 slides, so bear with me. A lot of them are fairly short and don't contain a ton of information, and hopefully you guys can read everything. For anybody who is listening and isn't watching, I will do my best to read what's on the slides, but I would definitely recommend, as I go through these attachments, you make sure you have the detachment available, because I'm not going to be running through like what the detachment does in any great detail. That's for longer form review content. If you want to see something like that, go and check out the Goonhammer reviews or the Art of War reviews, because they go through each detachment in depth, talking about like what is and what isn't and what doesn't work. I'm going to be talking about kind of what you're looking to build out of these, and why you might choose to do that over any of the other detachments in the book. Okay, with that said, let's have a flick over. I have 3 different windows open right now, so you'll need to bear with me as I get used to doing this one, because I have notes, the detachment, and also the slides to go through. But let's start at the beginning. We have a Flyblown host for Death Guard. So Flyblown host, basically, it's the one that gives you Scout for all your infantry and stealth, and then it has a variety of powerful other tools available to you. The main ones that stood out to me were we have access to some really fast-moving infantry. I think that's the thing that for me really, really stands out with this attachment is you have a stratagem for making your units significantly faster once they're in combat. You have Scout. It's very easy for you to get to access to like your staging positions much quicker in the game, whether that's Death Shroud or Poxwalkers or Blightlord Terminators or Plague Marines on foot. You can just get inveigled in these very defensive positions much quicker. Traditionally, Death Shroud are very slow to get to objectives. That's why you see them in Deep Strike a lot. And being able to just go that 9 inches plus D6 on turn 1 with your Scout 5, your movement 4, and then an advance. On most boards, you can get to your staging objective and just have a Death Shroud brick sat there, defensively ready to go, and then you can stage from there, but without having to necessarily spend a turn getting there or using like faster units like Fleshmore or Fetid Bloat Drones, for example, to like actually be your skirmishing unit. They can actually go and be skirmishing units now. So I really, really like that. The 6-inch Panic Consolidation stratagem you have access to is just insane. It's one of the most powerful stratagems Death Guard has access to, and honestly, it's one of the better things about Genestealer cults, which are a very powerful army right now. Being able to charge multiple things and then go past the thing you charge, pile it into something else, hit it, because you can always activate as long as you charge. You can like kill the first target, go into the second. It prevents screening. It gives you the ability to slingshot, making charges around units, especially when combined with the infantry version of Tank Shock that they have. There's lots and lots of like tools available to you to just increase your ability to play the movement game, and that's Death Guard are often known for losing to tape measure. Just your opponent measures 60 inches and goes, well, you can't shoot me with Death Shroud or charge me with Death Shroud if I'm more than that away. But you definitely do get a lot more ability to not have that happen to you. You can still play from Rapid Ingress and do all the traditional Death Shroudy style things or Blightlord style things, or you can play, Plague Marines with Fight First and Transports, and then gain the access to the range durability from Stealth. That means that you're not necessarily as beholden to only being really good against melee, because that's kind of a Death Guard problem. Like you have the -1 damage stratagem in combat in the traditional detachment. You have the -1 damage for Terminator sorcerers in combat. You have Fight First, but these are all combat-based buffs. You have the 1 stratagem for stealth. You have Smokescreen, but outside of that, there wasn't a ton of actual durability against range in the detachment, and this one definitely gives you a bunch of that, which I really, really like, especially in this metagame. And you still maintain a lot of those anti-melee tools, maybe not quite as much. You lose access to things like the -1 weapon skill, ballistic skill enhancement, or the +1 AP enhancement, +1 to -1 to save enhancement, same difference. So your damage output is definitely going to feel a lot lower. You also don't have sticky objectives, which means it's a lot harder for you to like you can't just like stick in your backfield and forget against armies that don't have anything. You've got to leave something back there, so you diminish a little bit there. You can't like just walk into the middle with like a scout move from cultists and say that's mine, and you have to take it off me because your opponent can just shoot you off it. Right? They don't have to like actually engage with you in the same way. So yes, you have that more durability, but your opponent's slightly less incentivized to play the game with you. So there's definitely some limitations there, and also your vehicles are just inherently less durable. Right? You don't have access to that -1 to hit strategy for them, and you don't have the -1 weapon skill ballistic skill that you can spread onto your vehicles or from your melee units onto your vehicles. That means that things like Mortarion, especially, can be like, effectively +2 to hit in this attachment compared to in the traditional attachment, right? So there is definitely limitations to this. I don't think it's just it's obviously not just straight upside, right? Like it would be very boring if it wasn't. Um, as far as data sheets go, Death Shroud really like the tankiness and the durability in shooting. They're already quite good in combat against combat, and the movement. They're a movement 4 data sheet. Being able to go much faster, really appreciate it. Poxwalkers already don't do damage, so being able to move a little bit faster, move a lot further with the 6 consolidation, they're a really good unit to use that because you can base a lot of things with the first wave, use the tank shock, get a bunch of damage, and then swing the rest of the squad around into other targets to grab them and hold them up, to steal objectives, all this kind of thing. My Fitix get a job to do, which is really nice. They're already like a reasonable data sheet. It gets a Rhino durability profile for 90 points, and then you add in the fact that it can kick out the -1 to wound stratagem for your infantry, and you can find suddenly like a Poxwalker squad your opponent thought was definitely going to die, suddenly doesn't die. Death Shroud against things with +1 to wound. There's a decent amount of shooting with +1 to wound floating around from things like Halobmar's Sisters. It's not super frequent, but it definitely exists. You can get a bunch of durability out there. Gene Circle of Ascension would be another example while I'm thinking about it. So yeah, just a nice thing to have access to. And then for anything like Blight Lords, if you were going to go down that route, it's a great thing to have access to. The Tallyman or any other sort of like infantry units that have that 18-inch loan up enhancement, right? Like the enhancements are really strong for this attachment. You've got 18-inch loan up, you've got heal, you've got the rural ones to wound, which means you're a little bit less shackled to Mortarion. Just really does give you a bunch of options within your gameplay. And I think it offers a compellingly different direction to and I just don't know the name of the regular attachment. I'm going to keep saying the indexed attachment. Because there's just a different direction here. Like there's a ton of things you can do in a very different direction that gives you access to movement and range durability as opposed to very high combat durability that you kind of lean into playing like a shooting game with people all the time. You saw a lot of like brigands, predators, playburst crawlers, and I think the list that we've got drafted up for this really doesn't lean into that at all. It really leans into I can put a lot of pressure on you. I have good combat and for Death Guard fast melee, and that kind of gets you most of the way to playing a real game with Death Guard in like the movement phase and the fight phase and with movement shenanigans. I played one game with this, played into Sisters, and I was very quickly on all the objectives, very able to just stage and get going and just get into the fight straight away. And yeah, you really do feel that durability from stealth on everything. Like there are definitely some armies that don't care about it as much. Lots of armies with +1 to hit, things like Votan ignore stealth naturally, but it's almost always at least good against something in your opponent's army. Very quickly, the list. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these, but more just so you guys can see kind of where my head's at for these. So this is Flyblown list with Mortarion, Typhus, 3 Death Guard Sorcerers. One has the Rural Ones enhancement, 3 Skulls of Death Shroud. So just giving you that durability against range and melee with the -1 to hit in range, the -1 to wound all the time, and the -1 damage in combat. Really does a good job of keeping these units ticking. 3 Skulls of 20 Poxwalkers. They really appreciate the -1 to hit. 2 fetid blood runs and 2 mephitic blight haulers. I think having played a game with this, I would definitely like to fit like a squad of cultists in to hold my home objective, or a tallyman with the enhancement for some more CP. I'm just not entirely sure where I would want to pull those points from right now. But yeah, like the idea of the list is that it's just an overwhelming wave of I'm going to contest the objectives, and I'm quite hard to shift, and you've got to deal with these Poxwalkers slipping and sliding around in your backfield, tagging up all your things, 6-inch piling, consolidating, and then there's also a 6 of Nurglings in this list that's not on this slide because I don't have it because it was not in the death card section. They could definitely be something with OC if you wanted that direction, but it's nice to have the ability to, because you're playing a scout army, it's nice to have the ability to block space quite well so that you can scout into that, so you can infiltrate the Nurglings to make a space that your opponent can't then block themselves with infiltrators to make sure you're Death Shroud or getting onto objectives and things like that. Okay, so now we have the chart that I'm going to be using to kind of go through each of these. You can broadly think of each of these boxes going from left to right from power as being half a star each, and then bottom to top as the same thing for interesting. Interesting for me is broadly meaning here ability to write lists that are novel, different, or approach the game like in a way that is compelling. It's not necessarily a measure of power, right? As I say, like there are definitely lots of ways to write an interesting detachment that doesn't do very much, or to write a very boring detachment that is very powerful. But basically, the more playstyles I think it encourages, the more different the playstyles are from what is already available. The more I'm leaning towards it being called classified as interesting, and then powerful. I am broadly taking as how usable are the tools available. And there is definitely a degree of under the current circumstances that may not hold up with longevity with power, but you're kind of going down the route of based on the current game state, how good do I think these detachments are? I would say right now you're kind of looking at something like Biosanctic being a 5 out of 5, Gladius being a 5 out of 5, that kind of thing, right? Like any of these detachments that just really are the best thing, one of the best things you can be doing in your detachment. 4-star detachments, you might say something like Host of Ascension for Gene Circle or Ironstone for Space Marines, right? Like it's a detachment that is good, but there are limitations and there are potentially better options even within your own faction, or it can't compete in sort of like the wider macro scale. Like I might say Talons of the Emperor for Custodes, right, would be something like it's like a 4 out of 5. It's a very good detachment, very playable in the right hands, but it's also lacking a lot of fundamental things that you would say you would require for a good detachment, and as a result, it doesn't have the best results across the board. You can kind of infer your own things, but yeah, if you were just like ignoring the line through the middle the arrows are in, because it's just like a center line, yeah, you could basically imagine that this is like 5 stars for interesting, 5 stars for power. This is sort of 2.5 stars for interesting, 2.5 stars for power. And then once you cross like into the boxes, this is above 3 stars or 3 stars and above in both categories, 3 stars and above in one category, less than 3 stars in the other, etc., etc. One thing I will say broadly, we're going to find a lot of stuff in the top right detachment, top right of this over the course, because I think most detachments are powerful, interesting in some combination, at least to like the 3 stars, right? Like, I think they're reasonably compelling. 3 stars being like sort of a B tier if you're thinking traditionally. But now back to Death Guard, because I've done my explainer. I have Death Guard at being so you can imagine this is like 4.5 stars for interesting, 4 stars for powerful, but top right quadrant. If things are next to each other, basically assume that they're like functionally the same, but like splitting hairs. And I kind of tried not to put anything directly on top of each other because it's not very interesting. Commit to your choices. I think it opens up a ton of movement options for Death Guard. It makes you very, very flexible in how you want to approach the game, and it's powerful enough to be compelling in a world where Death Guard are not amazing, but are pretty good. I think that's power compelling enough to be like, yep, 4 stars for power. I think you can do some very good things with this arm, with this detachment. I think it's completely playable within the context of Death Guard and the wider game. Okay, next up we have the Lion's Blade Task Force. So yeah, Lion's Blade Task Force basically gives you the Ravenwing and Deathwing buffs, so it very much encourages a mixed arms detachment. It wants you to play lots of different things. You want to mix and match buffs to make your, you got to charge in with getting in with your Ravenwing to make your Deathwing make combat better. A lot of your stratagems are kind of like do this if you have a Deathwing and a Ravenwing, or do this if you have a Ravenwing, this if you have both, kind of thing, right? Like the -1 to hit stratagem becomes a -1 to wound stratagem if you have both in combat. So the sort of like the most compelling things of this attachment, I think the heroic in your opponent's fight phase stratagem, intractable charge or whatever it's called, is maybe the best stratagem in the game. In the context of Space Marines, it gives you the ability to defend objectives without having to be under any risk and without even having to have more OC than your opponent on them necessarily. It is incredibly difficult for your opponent to comfortably walk onto an objective that you have a melee unit on, or even just like a high OC regular unit, and then that is like melee power level for Space Marines, right, which is going to be high enough that your opponent can then put something on that objective that you cannot then charge and kill or out OC from having come behind the wall, and then be staged up in position ready for your opponent's next turn, hopefully having killed the thing you just charged, having just gotten a free, 2 to 12 inches of movement based on your charge plus piling consolidation. There is for those of you who played through 8th and 9th edition, this is how heroic just used to work, and 6-inch heroic was one of the best things you could do for the entire edition. And people are going to be significantly worse at playing around it, and Fight First is significantly more powerful than it ever used to be, and more limited access. But Dark Angels have got plenty of access to it through the Judicar. There is just some insane. I can't explain to you how powerful it is to be able to control that much space with a melee unit. It's unfortunate the rest of the Tyranid package, I think, is a little one-dimensional. You have some good output buffs through the +1 to wound for Deathwing stratagem if you shot them with a Ravenwing that's close enough. Like, there's just a lot of asterisks and riders on a lot of things this attachment does. +2 to charge, but you must make a Ravenwing thing in first, right? So you end up with, like, you need to have 2 different directions, but The ability to go through walls with those Raven units is very good for scoring, and Raven units become very good harassment tools, things like Invader ATVs, and we'll come back to them. Plus 2 to charge on Terminators does solve a delivery problem, like you don't have advanced and charge access in this detachment, but being able to go, okay, my Deathwing are plus 2 to charge from reserve, so whether that's a Redemptor Dreadnought coming off the board edge or a Deathwing Nightsword falling out of the sky and charging, great, fantastic, very, very happy with that. And then Deathwing shooting is genuinely like fairly compelling in this attachment. Things like Redemptor Dreadnoughts, Ballistus Dreadnoughts, even the Repulsor and Lander Redeemer get +1 to wound as long as they're shooting in something close enough. You can also do like Azrael in a Hellblaster squad, anything like that. Getting +1 to wound does make those units punch pretty significantly above their weight into a lot of things. Interesting data sheets for me here. Invader EVs become one of the best in class harassment units in the game. Being able to force desperate escape tests on infantry units or non-vehicle monster units, while being toughness 5 with 8 wounds. Not a lot comfortably kills that when it charges them. And then it also triggers your +2 to charge, so your opponent kind of has to deal with it, which encourages them to kind of stay in combat with it, which then keeps it there, which then means that you get your +2 to charge with your Deathwing, whether they're walking up the board or charging them, right? It's just a nice little unit, fairly cheap at 60 points in the multi-melta. Yeah, very, very, very impressed with them in this attachment. Innistrad Companions are one of the best units of Inescapable Wrath. Again, Judicars going in that unit or Azure going in that unit. They're very durable, fight first, or incredible durability from Azure with the 4 vulnerable save. And OC2 base means that they are one of, if not the best objective holders in the game within the context of being high OC, good melee, and potentially fight first. It just solves all your problems. They just do things. Azrael is busted for a lot of reasons, but +1 CP is a very, very powerful ability to give, and this detachment definitely wants to be using its CP. +2 to char, +2 to +1 a turn means that you're able to get that CP rolling for Inescapable Wrath almost constantly, or the +1 to wound stratagem for Deathwing, or your rapid ingresses and your viral charges and all that kind of thing that kind of just goes with playing a melee army. Deathwing Knights are probably the best thing to deliver with this attachment. +2 to charge just means that they can have a 7 from reserve, but they're fairly slow. There's no real damage output increases for them here, but it is definitely a thing you can do. You could potentially look at things like the chaplain that gives them the ability to teleport, so you can start scoring on the board and then teleport it around, that kind of thing, but not necessarily. And then all the dreadnoughts, but specifically Redemptors, really, really like this attachment. +2 to charge just helps them get around the board again, playing the game a lot more actively. +1 to wound helps them with some of their thresholds. Redemptor dreadnoughts don't love being stuck at strength 9. Going up to strength 9 +1 to wound really, really helps them out against some of the bigger targets that you might be needing to solve with this army. Brutalis dreadnoughts really like the Inescapable Wrath stratagem. Being able to charge and then do their charge mortals in your opponent's turn is a really good way to just cause a bunch of out sequence problems. And the Redemptor dreadnoughts also not bad at doing it. And the Blitzes are just very, very priced to move. I would say the main things to look out for with this attachment, don't over-index on playing the Raven Wing stuff just because the +2 charge. Most of those data sheets are not very good. They're not played for a reason otherwise, and I don't think this detachment is enough to make you do it. Just play the good Marine stuff and then use this detachment's flavor to get you over the line. CB management definitely looks like it could be difficult. I was looking at some builds that included Storm Raven with Azrael inside it, but having Azrael starting off the table meant that he wasn't generating ACP very early, and I definitely wanted to avoid that. I like the idea of using him as an objective bully that has that generates the CP every turn, but then can threaten the Inescapable Wrath. That means your opponent mostly will leave him alone, and you can use the CP to do other things because the threat of using Inescapable Wrath stops your opponent from denying you the primary in the first place, rather than your opponent making you Inescapable Wrath, right? So you're kind of hoping that your opponent never actually calls your bluff and makes you do the damage. That's kind of the general rule of thumb. And then the last kind of thing is, you're not Gladius, right? You're very playing on the board. Gladius is an amazing attachment. It's incredibly flexible. It does an absolute ton of stuff. And not all of it is this attachment, but Inescapable Wrath is a really, really powerful stratagem, which opens up the direction. I think this could be interesting. I have it. We'll do my sample list first. My sample list, I'm going to need to move my big heat because some of these lists are a little bit bigger. Nope, that's far too big. There we go. So my sample list is Azrael, Captain with Power Fist and Caliban Armaments, +1 damage, a Judicar, 5 Assault Ancestors, 2 squads of Deathwing Knights, 5 Infiltrators, 2 Innistrad Companions, 5 Scouts, 3 Invader ATVs, all solo, a Repulsor Executioner to have to carry that captain around. I was thinking about it and I'm like, I want something big to use the +1 to wound, some real damage, and then 1 Stormseeker Hammer Strike because it can give ignore cover to the Repex, which has that very high volume, low AP shooting, which really benefits from ignore cover. And then it itself can move through walls, has some pretty decent guns with a bunch of Melta, just helps you answer some bigger problems. And then it can charge in to trigger off your +2 to wound, and the Repulsor Executioner is a transport that is Deathwing, so it can get around the board, it can get +2 to charge, get it involved and play tank shot a little bit more, and it can transport the assault intercessor squad to where it needs to be, and then potentially pick up like a Judicar squad or whatever, right, to like really get involved. I think there's a world where that could just be like an impulsor and another scoring unit, all that kind of thing, right? Like there's so many directions you could take with this, but this is kind of where my head was at, was good combat, good ways to deliver it, and then like a backup of shooting with a Repulsor Executioner or sort of hammer strike, some ATVs with Melta. Yeah, I'm fairly happy with this list in principle. I think it works really well, and I actually would really like to get this one on the table myself. Okay, for overall power, I don't think this is as good as the Death Guard one. I do have it sort of sitting at what would this be? 3 stars, power 3.5 stars. Interesting. I think it asks some really interesting questions, like how good is charging your out of sequence. We'll ask that question later when we do on much worse data sheets. Charging your opponent's turn without them having charged at all it's busted. It just is an incredible stratagem, and I think it gives the canny player the ability to play through so many situations. But it does have the problem of you are opting into playing Space Marines data sheets relatively fairly, like not completely fairly, right? You still have +2 to charge, right? There's still, you can walk through walls and all that thing. Like for Jam a Storm even through a wall, you'll have a good time. But for me, it struggles by comparison to Gladius, and in power level, I think the same. Right? Like it just doesn't feel like, especially at the better your opponents get, the more you are going to find that Inescapable Wrath is playable. Not easily, but your opponents are not going to give you the opportunities to do that. And I think it feels, to use like a team term, it feels like a 10-10 army, right? It's very good at getting draws, but it's never going to really blow out its opponent because you are just playing fair Space Marines. Like fair within the context of how fair Space Marines can be. And then you have this one absurd stratagem that the second your opponent sees Lions Blade right on your list, they are going to be like, oh, okay, you're playing Lions Blade to abuse that stratagem because, yeah, why else would you be playing this attachment, right? There's just not a ton of other things here. There's maybe like a Wall of Dreads list and things like that, but there are already Wall of Dreads lists. That's the thing. You can play an Ironstorm or Firestorm. It's not really anything new or novel. And that for me, lowers the interest level, right? Like this isn't doing anything that makes me go, okay, let me play a bunch of Dark Angels data sheets that I haven't touched before. And within Marines, that's more of a sin for me than Death Guard because Marines just, there are so many bad data sheets or so many data sheets that don't see play. And this doesn't do enough to really make me be like, okay, cool. If there was like a durability increasement, I don't want a wish list, right? Like, that's the kind of thing I don't want to get into here. But for me, not as interesting as it could have been. Not as interesting as some of the other options. It still feels like it's not as powerful as any of them either. So, 3 stars, 3.5 stars, still on the good side, right? I would say basically anything that hits the top side of this line, I'm going to be like, is a success. And anything that's down here is a like marginal success, right? I will call it like a, and then anything down here is a failing grade, right? That's kind of it's like, this is an F, this is a C, this is a B or an A, depending on, and then this is like an A and then drops off to like a C as it hits like here, right? Like you don't want it to be too powerful. Maybe we'll talk about that later as well. All right, let's move on to Warrior Bioform Onslaught, which was the day 3 for Tyranids. This is the one that gives you extra OC and an invulnerability for all your tier 2 warriors. And the high and low of the interesting things with detachment is that basically, for me, this detachment it makes warriors a real data sheet. And what I mean by that is that warriors, as by and large, aren't a unit that really does anything. They are not that durable. They don't hit that hard. They're not that fast. You can kind of buff them, like Vanguard Tyranids, Vanguard Onslaught, is very capable of buffing them by giving them advance and charge, access to +1 to hit, and a bunch of other stuff like that. And in that situation, that context, they become quite good, but not incredible, right? They're still not like a game-defining data sheet, right? They are good, but you definitely see Vanguard lists that don't include them, right? That kind of thing. But they're powerful. This makes them what they feel like they should be base rate, and then you kind of don't have a detachment rule. That's kind of how I feel about this detachment, is that you get warriors to be a real data sheet, and then that's it, right? And there's nothing else. There's no follow-up. It has access to advance and charge, which in Tyranid is actually fairly rare. There's only Hormagaunts that have that on data sheet, and only one detachment has access to it otherwise, which is Vanguard Onslaught, and it's a data sheet rule that some data sheets get. This has the ability to give it to things like Broodlords, Winged Hive Tyrants. You can give it to a Hive Tyrant who joins a Hive Guard unit, right? Like there's a bunch of stuff you can get advance and charge on this attachment through an enhancement that wouldn't be able to have it otherwise, and I think that's kind of compelling and interesting. And I would like to try things like a Hive Tyrant attaching to a unit. You've got regeneration tricks. Being able to heal models, especially a model with 3 OC, is quite good for flipping objectives. You can do the good old stand behind a wall, put one guy on the objective. If your opponent brings out enough guns to kill the unit in multiple activations, you kill the guy on the objective. But to the first one, you're like, I didn't mean it. And then if your opponent brings out not enough guns, you just start killing the guys behind the wall and keep the objective. And then if you're whatever happens, you heal back onto it, and you're like, sick. I hold the objective. I get my primary now. And there's some pretty good strats for buffing shooting. You have a reroll 1 to win stratagem. You have a pretty solid +2 strength stratagem, which is actually generally quite compelling. There are a lot of turreted breakpoints for shooting that is not that high. The kind of big ones that jump out are Execreens. If you take an Execreen from strength 9 to strength 11 and you shoot a toughness 10 vehicle, you are effectively going from 5s to wound to 3, or you are going from 5s to wound to 3s to wound, which is a 100% increase in damage output for 1 CP, which is pretty good. And it's effectively a double shoot. Zoanthropes, the same kind of thing. You can go from strength 7 to strength 9, which helps them with their small guns against vehicles, and strength 12 to strength 14. So if you're shooting at something that's toughness 13, like for example a monolith, which is not something that you don't see a ton, especially with hypercrypt being around in the metagame, being able to win that on 3s instead of 2s, or 3s instead of 5s is pretty compelling. Yeah, it really does help. It's a pretty good stratagem. There's also an ignore cover at range stratagem, which is pretty good. The note I have over there is the best data sheet for Harridan. That's a quote from Tyler, who says, Tyler Bertel, who said that, yeah, because Paravors are a pain in the ass to deliver because they're on 8mm base and they have to come out of reserve and they only have 12 in range. The Harridan really relies on ignore cover to get most of its damage through because it's only AP3, and you kind of need to kill things when you shoot it. So, this detachment gives you some access to some stuff like that. The other data sheets that obviously benefit here, Terror Warriors benefit like a monster, right? Like genuinely do become quite compelling data sheets under these changes. The question for me becomes, is it compelling enough to be better than just playing Invasion Fleet and having access to that 5 out Feel No Pain and that sustained hits? Like, are you getting enough out of the durability on the Warriors to like hold ground? Because Tyranid is usually relying on lone operatives or durable monsters to hold objectives. This detachment is kind of saying, well, what if we played medium infantry in a world where medium infantry feel fairly fragile right now? I don't love playing them into Gene Circle. I don't love playing them into Castigators and Sisters, Doomsday Arcs and Necrons. There are a lot of things out there that are very happy munching on medium infantry because they have that kind of like nice spread of volume and damage that 3 wound toughness 5 and 6 just doesn't appreciate. Does the 5 invulnerable save really get them there? I would like to see it on the table. And then I also have a note here, obviously hidden by Warriors. Execreens are probably the best data sheet in Tyranids. Biovor is arguable, but really good data sheet, and this detachment, X-Queens are good in this detachment the same as they are everywhere else. Let's kind of have a look at my sample list. So my sample list for this is a Neuro Tyrant who'll be joining a Zoanthrope squad for +1 to hit. We have a Winged Tyrant Turret with Elevated Might who'll be joining the Melee Bioweapons Warrior squad. I think the first squad is fine. You give them advance in charge. The second one, much worse, doesn't have advance in charge. And that's the thing that you're really here for. Hive Tyrant, who gives out the lethal hits and the advance and shoot, just helps you keep your guns mobile, helps you punch up that strength barrier with the volume of your warriors. It should be 3x3 Tyranid warriors there. I will apologize for that. I'm actually going to just go and edit that because I actually do think that kind of matters. And I would like everybody to know that I'm not a numpty. As I try to figure out how to actually do that. I'm going to do that later. I will be back in 1 second to this. 3x3 Tyranid. I'll go back and add the nerdlings to the Death Guard one as well, because I can flick through them all later. Aha, what a genius I am. I would say I was going to edit this out, but I'm just not going to. Promise I'm still here. Window, Chrome tab, presenter window. There we go. Okay, that should be back. So very quickly, there is our Death Guard list again with the Nurglings added. Cool, I'm so smart. And then we jump back here to the turrets. Okay. Yeah, so we have 6 Terror Warriors with melee bioweapons, 6 with ranged bioweapons. They're not going to get an enhanced attached character. They're just going to be solo. It's just to have a brick with 18 OC that can go and like minorly bully some fights. 3 squads of 3. And it's also just efficiency for strategy usage. 3 squads of 3, 9 OC, 65 points. Go and bully some points. Don't expect much out of them. Their damage output is not great, but they are, they'll win a fight with a scout squad. 2 squads of 10 Hormagaunts. I really like Hormagaunts for OC delivery. You could definitely try to find the points to beat these gargoyles, that kind of thing, but just OC on points, deny your opponent primary, play that game. 6 Zoanthropes. You have advanced to shoot on them. They are not immobile. They are infantry. I do find this unit awkward to use outside of exactly Vanguard, where it has a teleport stratagem, but they are deliverable and they do very, very good damage under the circumstances. 3 X-Greens because I feel like you just start heroes with the 3 X-Greens. And then we have 3 Venithopes and a Psychophage. That's going to kick out Stealth, Cover, and -1 to hit. Or Stealth, Cover, and a 6-up Feel No Pain to every infantry within 6, and then everything except Stealth to monsters. Just helps really keep that durability alive, right? Like we're paying a detachment rule to give these hero warriors a 5 invulnerable save. Let's also give them Stealth and the 6-up Feel No Pain and really just keep them ticking for their durability. Like, we've paid for it, let's use it. We're not just going to be sitting behind walls. These are the guys that are going to be holding objectives for us. And then I have a Biovore and a Lictor as kind of like our pseudo bonus scoring package. Lictor and Biovore just, they fit pretty much into any Tyranid list. I'm generally always fairly happy to have them. Now, I don't know. I don't love this detachment, and I'm definitely not. I'm not. Excuse me. There are definitely people out there who have been excited about this and who really like it. I am unfortunately not one of them. I will definitely be aiming to get it on the table, but I have it here at 2 out of 5 for interesting, and then 3 out of 5 for power, because I do think it is genuinely a fairly good detachment. It's just kind of boring to me. When I read the data sheet, the detachment, I don't want it to be you have playable data sheets, but you don't have a detachment rule. Sustained hits, army wide, and sustained hits army wide is much more interesting to me for against infantry than making a data sheet good, because it makes your army good, right? Like I can play a bunch of different things. This detachment feels like it kind of railroads you into playing one specific way with a bit of other. It is a way that isn't amazingly supported right now, but like melee warriors are already pretty good, are already very good in Vanguard. I don't hate the other ones in Nexus, and it feels like whenever I write a list of detachment, I'm like, I just wish this was Invasion Fleet, or I just wish this was Snapdragon Nexus, or I just wish this was Vanguard, depending on how heavy I go in which direction. It feels really hard for me to write a list about this that I look at it and I go, I am completely happy with this as is. There are a few things to try out, like the 20, you can play 20 Gargoyles with a Winged Prime attached with -1 to hit, or you can play more Winged Primes and all that kind of thing, right? Like there's definitely things out there you can do. The list there I said I would definitely love to see things like a Trigon in it, because I think the Trigon with the 3 Trap and Ingress is really powerful, and this attachment, it doesn't not support it, right? Like it still just does its job in the same way as it would in most of the attachments. But for me, the compelling things here are playing the good shooting Tyranid units, X-Greens, which I could just make better in any other detachment, or have better melee support than I could play, Scout Advanced and Charging Gene Stealers, or, like how much am I really getting out of playing Primary Dial an army that's already very good at Primary Dial? It's hard to say if you're doubling down on a strength and making it better for the doubling down, or if you're like already past the point of Tyranids are already so good at Primary Denial with Gargoyles, Wormagaunts, and Shadow in the Warp. Do you really need to play them on top of it, right? Is this better than just having Maliceptors doing the same job? I don't know. I don't personally feel like it is, but there are people out there who are excited about this attachment, and I would love to see them prove me wrong. And I have it on the upper half of power level, which we'll see. I want to believe. I like Terror Warriors. I've played 18 of them at WTC before. I would love to believe, but right now for me, it's not quite there. Still, I would call this a passing grade. It does open up a new dimension. Okay, Hexwarp, Thrallband, Thousand Suns. This is probably the toughest set of this I had to write. I had to take a break after this one. This detachment, wow, the synergy is kind of bad. You get reroll ones on psychic weapons. Rubrics already have reroll ones. They give it to their psychic weapons. You get +1 to wound if you're in your flow of magic, but you also lose the +1 to wound. You lose the reroll ones to wound, which it feels bad to lose the synergy when you get a benefit. So sometimes you're encouraged to not take control of the objectives, and it's also already a benefit that Magnus gives. So do you not play Magnus in this attachment? That's the direction I tried to build the list, but it didn't feel great. You're definitely less shackled to him. You can definitely play a lot more spread out, but you lose the +2 movement aura that he brings. Like it feels like you're losing out on so much by not bringing him, but also gaining so little for not having him. You're kind of just getting rules you had already and then not running one of the best issues in the detachment or in the army. And that's hard for me to justify. I definitely tried. I built around it and tried to play without it, but we'll see how successful you guys feel that is. I don't personally love the list. You're definitely less vulnerable to melee. Having a fallback shooting charge stratagem makes Scaraboccle Terminators much more flexible. It helps Rubrics with one of their biggest issues, which is getting tagged and not really having a good enough melee to get themselves out. And it does help Magnus as well in that sense. Magnus does like that. You've got some interesting stratagems, like you've got an ignore cover stratagem, which can help with some of the longer range firepower, like the bolters on Scaraboccle cults. And there's actually some really good enhancements. +3 Seer Psychic Weapon, I think I specifically really like on the Terminator Sorcerer. He has a 3-shot gun with Dev Wounds and Anti-Vehicle Monster 4+, getting that up to 6 shots is doubling its damage output. It's effectively the same as Arcane Vortex. I'm going to put that in the biggest inverted commas I possibly can, in that it doubles the damage of a gun. It's maybe not the same caliber because you're not putting in as good a gun, but it's still doing the same kind of thing. And then there's also the +2 strength for psychic weapons ones, which I do quite like on like an arcane vortex, or not an arcane vortex, an infernal master, pushing that gun up to strength 8 with rerolls to wound. It does help it push some damage through. So yeah, the best additions to Detachment, I think the Scarab Occult Terminators benefit the most, but also just anything you want to play separately from the bubble, right? So I was having a look at things like the Exalted Sorcerer on disc, because they can slow down your opponent's approach to you. You can kind of try to control them and play them off at a bit more angle, but then you're also getting your reroll ones to wound, your +1 to wound while they're in isolation, so they don't necessarily need to be like as slaved to the unit. And then you've got just the other one is, yeah, Scarab Occult Terminators. You know, their sorcerer benefits pretty strongly from it. Very rarely in your Magnus. They have a 6-inch deep strike stratagem in this detachment, and then a deep strike stratagem for rubrics, so you can play a little bit more aggressively on and around the board. I kind of have written here, no evidence found for other data sheets. I think Mutant Vortex Beasts, they gain as much from this detachment as anything else. There's none in the list I'm going through, but I definitely think because the list felt very low in Cabal points, because Scarab Occult Terminators are very expensive and only generate 2 Cabal points in a full strength unit with a character for nearly 500 points. So I found it very difficult to justify fitting Mutant Vortex Beasts in. But I definitely think you could just play 3 more Vortex Beasts detachment and be like, they're just going to be a fine data sheet, the same as they are in the other one. And doubling your ritual range is never going to be bad. So here's the list I put together, which is Ahriman, 3 Exalted Sorcerers on disc, 3 Infernal Masters, one of which has Arcane Might, which is the plus strength one, 1,000 Sword and Terminator Armor with the +3 shots, 4 squads of Rubrics, 10 Scarab Occult Terminators, 2 squads of Thousands of Cultists, and 2 squads of Enlightened. This nets out to 22 Cabal points, which is enough that you can put one Rubric, you can put the Sorcerer with Terminator Armor with the Terminators in reserve, and also the Rubrics and a character in reserve. And I believe that still leaves you with enough Cabal points, because obviously you can't do double Cabal points because, or double rituals, because that's enhancement for cult magic. But I believe with that would give you 17, which is enough for a double move for 5, a double move for 5, and a Doombolt for 7, with leaving like 5 spare for like 2 for like a reroll in 2 phases, which, you know, this army's going to need the durability. You don't have the blank stratagem, that kind of thing. So that seemed fine. Then you can like 6-inch deep strike the Thousand Suns. You can deep strike the rubrics. Like, it gives you some flexibility in that sense. I don't love this list. It feels fairly weak. I was not able to put something together that felt like it was using the detachment rule. Every other list I built just kind of looked like a Call of Magic list. It was just, you know, our Magnus and 1 to 3 Mutilation Vortex Beasts and sorcerers and Infernal Masters that were worse than they were in Call of Magic. Yeah, I don't think this detachment is a passing grade. And as we'll move on to the next thing, kind of see, yeah, I've got it down here. It's not very interesting. I give it a 1 star on interesting, because ultimately it doesn't encourage build diversity. Thousands of don't have a lot of data sheets, but this doesn't encourage any of the stuff that wasn't good in Cult of Magic, except maybe Scarab Occults. Scarab Occults still really like the make your bolters psychic weapons and then get full rerolls, or get +1 to hit and wound from Magnus. So it's really tough to be like, I think this attachment does something interesting for Thousand Suns, because I don't think it does. And then for power, like, there's something here. There are a couple of things that you can justifiably do, but I give it a 1.5 stars. It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't tick the boxes for me. It makes it very, very, very dull. There's just not a lot of direction for Thousand Suns from this. I'm sure someone out there will be reading this and be like, or hearing this and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe it! My Scarab Occult Carminator build is incredible. Please prove it." I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, hey, prove it, but I would love to believe that that is a thing that can be done, and that Scarab Occults are not just a joke data sheet right now, but um, or a joke data sheet in this detachment specifically. But I don't feel like it's going to be the case. And the biggest stretch of all time, I think this is the worst attachment of the set that we've been shown so far. It might not be the weakest, but it is the most dull and the least interesting. All right. Okay, let's move on to Haloscreed Battle Clade, which is the Adeptus Mechanicus detachment. This is a super adaptive. Basically, you get to pick 2 units, and they get to pick one of 4 buffs: +1 toughness, stealth, +2 move, and advance and charge. And then there are a bunch of stratagems that interact with that, giving you a bonus if you are a Halo unit. You can give them an additional 1 for 1 CP, and they take more wounds, or you can give a unit 1 if they're not 1. You can get reroll 1s to wound, reroll all if you are. If you're a Halo, you can disembark from a transport and charge, right? Like, lots of really, really interesting things. One of my favorite combos you can do, just to shout it, you can do +2 move on a Dune Rider, and then give the guys inside the the Halo keyword, and then jam it forward, disembark them, going the extra two, take also disembark, and then charge out of it, and then have all the Halo Creed buffs afterwards, which is great fun. I really like that you can use the ability on units and transports. Is one of the few rules that doesn't interact with that. Yeah, it's also got some decent phase options. Having a reactive move, we've seen from a lot of the detachments that just having a reactive move in general is incredibly powerful. I might play some very good infantry. Skystalkers, Taraxi, sterilizers, Rust-Stalkers, infiltrators, all of these things really benefit from being able to just slide around the board. Vanguard, Skitarii Vanguard sliding around the board is one of the most frustrating things. Because they drop their OC and they can drop you to 0. If you walk next to something and you have already put your unit that was going to do an action and they slide next to it and go, you're OC 0, now you can't start an action. It's really, really, really hilarious. And definitely a thing to keep an eye on this attachment, is that's the thing they can do. And then also it has a critical 5 stratagem. And we've seen from Chaos Space Marines and Gene Call and all these other attachments, just having access to crit 5s makes any gun with lethal or sustained hits very, very capable of punching up its weight. And there are some really, really good ones in AdMech I kind of get to in a second. So the most interesting data sheet for the detachment I have is Castellan robots. Being able to have canticles outside of the detachment, getting access to that +1 to hit in whatever phase, or +1 AP for their power vest, pushing them to AP3, really, really does help out, especially if you're running them with a fist in their twin link, or AP3 in their guns, whatever direction you tend to go with it. Rust Stalkers, able to access advance and charge in this detachment. You can have 2 units with advance and charge, and then a third unit using the advance and disembark. You can connect with authority at the same time. Not a thing you can do in Skitarii Hunter cohort without being very close to your opponent, because only one of them can advance and charge with the stratagem. It just really, really gives you a ton of flexibility. I really, really like it. Being able to have kind of a more bricky detachment, where instead of having a buff for everything, you get to pick a couple of killer things for the current situation you're in and go say, you go kill, lets you play a more sort of high level admech game, right? Rather than needing 400 units and 1,000 IQ, you can kind of be like, all right, cool. These 2 things are going to go solve my problems this turn. Whether that's Cataphrons, Castellans, Infiltrators, Rust-Stalkers, Sterilizer, whatever it is, you solve those 2 problems and you're like, cool. Everything else just chills, does its data sheets, and the data sheets are fine, right? They're not insane. They're just admech data sheets. They're okay. Cataphront Breachers, I really like this attachment. There's an enhancement that gives them both canticles, which means that they could be -1 to hit, +1 to hit, +1 AP, advance and shoot all at the same time, and they could just have everything ready to go. And I really, really like that for Cataphrons. It just keeps them very durable, very offensive as well. And for the point you're paying for that data sheet, you want it to be. They also can have a manipulate seed in them who gives them lethal hits, which then with their guns being strength 8, it means they have the ability to crit 5s, full rerolls, really sink it into monsters, which is one of the things that Admech can struggle with, because they don't have a ton of anti-monster firepower. They're mostly anti-vehicle firepower. But that unit becomes very multi-purpose, and then when they've got all the canticles active, they're good enough in combat. There's a fallback and shoot stratagem, which then again removes one of their weaknesses to getting tagged. I really, really like them as attachment, and their infantry. They can't use the reactive move, unfortunately, but they do get a ton of stuff out of it. And then I'll put a note in here. Allies for now. Technically, currently, you can make allies your Halo units, but I wouldn't expect that to last. For the time being, though, you can enjoy an advanced charge in Canis Rex. Or a toughness 13 Canis Rex. I would not recommend trying it. I do think there's a decent chance that somebody would hit you. Not that I'm encouraging that. But yeah, just a thing to keep in mind is that is a thing that is currently technically legal. Okay, here's my sample list. So we have a Snapdragon Adeptus with the transmolecular dyad wafers. That gives the unit for the game, even if he gets precisioned, the canticles ability, and then a couple of other things. I think it makes them a Halo unit for the entire game, which is just great. You get a Tech-based Manipulus giving out lethal hits to a unit, and then cognitive reinforcement to give them both canticles. So yeah, he's going to be joining a squad of Cataphront Breachers, just giving them all the buffs in the world. Techno-Archaeologist for some Deep Strike Denial, 2 squads of Vanguard for the reactive move shenanigans, and just having OC and triggering your battle line based rules. 2 Taraxi Skystalker units for scoring. There's also 5 of Skitarii Infiltrators. 110 of Taraxi Sterilizers for big hit flamer, kill thing dead. 3 squads of Rust-Stalkers because they just simply slam. 50 attacks with devastating wounds. There's a reroll once to hit and wound stratagem that's really, really beneficial for them in this detachment. That unit definitely has a little bit of a damage output issue sometimes, where but reroll once to hit and wound does help it just get over the line a little bit. They don't have crit 5s, which doesn't help. If they they don't really benefit from that. I don't think they have sustained hits or anything like that. But it would definitely be nice if they could really, really make use of that as well. But for what they are, I think it's okay that they're just kind of okay. And then we have 4 Castellan robots with twin Castellan fists. I like the fists. I think there's an argument you could go for running all the phosphor. You can definitely run the plasma on the phosphor on the back, the damage 2 one instead of the flamer. I like the idea of that, especially if you're going to keep them in the reroll doctrine, right, for a protector, to have them be like -1 to hit and or to have them be like reroll +1 to hit, and then you can give them hit rerolls for the cybernetic Datesmith and like really have them go to town. But the fists, it's a lot of attacks at damage 3. It's a thing that this army really likes. And they can be toughness 11 if you have them in Aegis Protocol, and then also give them +1 to wound from Halo Doctrine, right? Like just really, really cool unit. Really, really tons of options. And I'm a big fan of that. And then a Scorpius Dune Rider to ship around one of those squads of Ruststalkers. Big fan of this detachment. I really, really like it. Where did I put this one? It has now become late enough in the day that I am losing track of where I put things a couple hours ago. Yeah, I have Admech up here. I think this is an incredibly interesting attachment. I think it opens up a ton of play patterns. Really, really, really cool, flexible detachment that gives you direction here, direction there, but also doesn't stop you if you are like, I just want to play Castellans, right? Like you can definitely play the first squad is going to be great. The second and third squads are still going to be Halo, right? If you want them to be, like, you're not going to like lose out on that. So you can like really, really make the detachment sing in the way you want, right? Because it's a lot much about picking the two things you want to be powerful every turn. Now, what that does mean is that the rest of your army doesn't get to be powerful every turn, right? And that is obviously a limitation, right? You can't just have everything going all at once. But you are able to like make the two things you want to be the most powerful, and then also like the one thing that has died wafers as well, because I think that's just a good reason to run that, is that you get all 3 Halo overrides. It's just really, really nice to sort of like have all of these options available to you. Yeah, for me, it's about flexibility, power, new direction, right? Like there's no real way to play big titty units in Admech right now. Like Radzone is probably the closest we get because it has the sustained hits enhancement that really does really help out with that. But this one just gives you so much more in that direction. It really does make you like powerful, flexible, and I like that. And so in terms of power level, I have it as a 4, like toward the top end. I think Admech are genuinely quite good right now, and this attachment is among the best ways to play Admech. And for me, that means it's probably it's not one of the best things to do in the game right now. I don't think Admech are a top 5 army by any stretch. I don't think this is a top 5 top 10 detachment in the game or anything like that. But it does what it says on the tin, and it does it well. And I want to I feel like this is an absolute flavor home run, power home run. Just does everything I'm looking for out of the army. And I'm going to stop vamping about it now and move on to something that people who have not read the Admech Index can relate to. That's not the 4 of you that know what's going on. Apologies as I flex about with my presentation. Okay, next up we have Starshatter Arsenal, which is the Necron detachment. So this detachment is really cool. It's genuinely amazing. It gives you fast damage, stratagems for defensive, stratagems to react, stratagems for offense. It has a ton of tools. It gives you the ability as the player to say, I have the agency to make whatever I want and whatever build I choose, do something. You're going to get +1 to hit against units and objectives. You're going to get +1 assault for all your vehicles and mounted units. It means you're fast, you're flexible, you're able to answer things, and you do more damage to units and objectives, which is how you score points and win the game. Standing on the circles wins games. Shocking, I know. You are very much not restricted to shooting. That +1 to hit works on everything. So if you want to charge in, your Scorpex, your flayed ones, your Lich Guard, your Triarch Praetorians, whatever melee unit you like, this detachment does something for them. And then all of the stratagems are almost all the stratagems generally do something better if it's on a vehicle or monster or a vehicle or mounted, but it's not bad to use on everything else, right? Like the reactive move is still D6 for everything else. It's just flat 6 for vehicles. The +1 to wound doesn't care. The -1 to wound is locked. The flat 6 is locked, but a lot of the powerful ones, the +1 to wound, and those specifically for me being the +1 to wound and the reactive plus, are just not locked to non-Titanic, which means melee is laughing, loves it, absolutely gassed up. Stratagems are great, and then it has some of the best enhancements in the game. We have -1 damage, we have fallback shoot, we have fallback and shoot, we have ignored cover, which is great, and then we have reroll ones to hit and wound, which is an aura that you can put on a Catacomb command board for non-Titanic. That means it works on your melee, it works on your shooting, right? This detachment very much says whatever you want to do, we support you, right? Like it has a tool to make everything better. In that line, we have what is this detachment good at? Doomsday Arcs. Doomsday Arcs are generally fairly volatile. They're D6 shots, they hit on 3s, they need to stay still for heavy, and they're fairly immobile because of their big size. This detachment says, cool, they can go through walls, they can advance and shoot, they can get +1 to hit against units and objectives, and they can get another source of reroll ones besides the Silent King, which means that the Silent King can either have ignore modifiers to make sure that that AP4 damage 4 is really doing its points you're paying for, or you can have rear ones to hit and wound in 2 places. Your Doomsday Arcs aren't stacked all together and vulnerable to being tagged and wrapped and held up and killed. So Doomsday Arcs really, really like it. They also have just like randomly the 20 other shots that really do appreciate +1 to hit, +1 to wound potentially. Really, really, really great detachment for Doomsday Arcs. Silent King himself like really appreciates being able to sit in the ignore modifiers sometimes, right? Sometimes you play against things like Deathwing Knights, you want to have rear ones to hit wound, you also want to have ignore modifiers. Silent King gets to do both because you can now have a Overlord or a Catacomb Command Barge, and they're giving it the rear ones to hit and wound, meaning that he can focus on doing his best thing, which is saying to screw all your rules. This attachment really, really benefits cheap OC for flipping objectives. You want to play, these small trading units that Necrons have that are like hitty but not the most hitty. Well, their biggest weakness is that when you're hitty but not quite hitty enough, and when you try to trade an objective and you fail, you often die back. And this detachment does a really good job of alleviating the chance that you will try to make something happen and not have it work. You got to kill that objective, cool. +1 to hit against them naturally, and +1 to wound against them from the stratagem. And now your score picks go in, they hit on 2 rolling 1s, and they have +1 to wound, so they're strength 7 +1 to wound. Cool, they wound those jump back in their scissors on 2s. Doesn't matter if they armor contempt, they're gonna die now. Your 5 flayed ones going with their 20 attacks hitting on 2s now, not hitting on 3s, reduces that volatility, smooths that variance curve. Now they're going to consistently hit about 20 times with sustained hits, and that just means that you're much better at flipping objectives, you're much better at playing primary. I think it's very easy for the detachment to fall into a pattern of being stuff guns behind walls, hide, run out, shoot, and then there's a lot of volatility in that. It's very easy for your opponent to just stand behind the walls. You can get one thing a turn through the walls, but that's not going to be enough to like really pressure your opponent. You've got a bit of indirect from the Silent King. You're going to need to play some level of interaction unless you're playing on very light boards, playing in teams, right? Whatever, right? If you're playing in teams, you can have guaranteed on a light board. Yeah, maybe you don't need the melee, but in general, for singles play, you're going to want some level of interaction, and this detachment makes your interaction better at the thing that is interaction is best at, which is flipping objectives. And then all of your cheap vehicles just become much more interesting in this attachment. Anything that benefits from advance and shoot, annihilation barges, Captain Command barges, Trark Stalkers, anything like that that just gets the ability to go forward and stand a place and threaten a reactive move at flat six to get back behind a wall, cause a problem, but also like not quite being durable, not quite being so fragile that your opponent doesn't have to commit something real to killing it, but also if your opponent doesn't kill it, it can go and do something now, right? Like you put a Duke Annihilation Barge in the open, your opponent pops up to shoot it, you go -1 to wound, it's got a 4 vulnerable save, maybe it doesn't die, and then you advance off and do something else, and then if they do put enough stuff out to kill it, well then you walk your Doomsday Arcs out and you shoot that thing, and hopefully you hit on 2s rolling 1s, because they were on an objective while they were doing it. So you kind of get a down if you do, down if you don't scenario for your opponent, where your guns are durable, fast, and flexible, which means that you can make your opponent trade with them in ways they maybe don't want to, or you get to do something with them if they don't. There is obviously, so I kind of want to talk about the one fragility to this army that I definitely found in like the games I played with it. Hypercrypt makes the 3 or 4 things you want the most in the perfect place, right? You can pick up 3 Doomsday Arcs and put 3 Doomsday Arcs in exactly the right positions and go, or 2 Doomsday Arcs, 2 Monoliths, whatever, right? You're shooting platform and Hypercrypt and go, they are in exactly the right place on the right angle, they can see that thing. You are still moving on the table as Starshatter. That means walls and terrain and other models get in the way, traffic block you, you get jammed up. And the 3 or 4 guns that you're running that are the best things in your army are still limited by line of sight and are never going to be in the perfect position. Now, what you gain by that is everything else in your army that isn't those 3 things raises up to being more flexible, because Hypercrypt can only move 3 or 4 things that way. Starshatter moves everything, 60 to 50 to 80% is good. Hypercrypt moves 3 things 100% and everything else gets, F all. On aggregate, that's better. But nothing in Necrons hits quite the same as a Doomsday Arc within like the weight class of non-Titanic. The Canoptic Doomstalker is close, but not quite. And it's, for what it is, fairly fragile. Like toughness 8 and a 4 vulnerable save doesn't go a mile these days, unfortunately. And even toughness 9 4 save doesn't go like forever for the Doomsday Arc. But and it doesn't hit as hard. It's 3 damage, not 4 damage, etc., etc. So there is the downside that you do have the limitation that your 3 biggest things, the Doomsday Arcs, don't get to be as perfect. But what they do get to be is more reliable and probably do it longer. Which to me means consistency rather than spike damage, and usually over the course of a tournament that is going to be stronger. So yeah, I think for that reason, Starshatter is more powerful than Hypercrypt. That's gonna how I'm gonna put it. Okay, let's have a look at the sample list. I would call this, Project War Crimes. This is broadly based on Anthony Vanal's list. There's a couple of adaptations here just from like the game I played with it. So we have Silent King, we have a Catacomb Command Barge with the Ruler One's aura, a Hexmark Destroyer who has the fallback and shoot aura, or pick a unit, fallback and shoot. We have the Scorpic Lord with the -1 damage enhancement, so you can pick a unit with -1 damage. He's generally more aggressive and will be walking out with the Silent King, so you can check the -1 damage on there. 2 Flayed Ones, 3 Scorpic Destroyers, 2 Locust Destroyers solo, 2 Annihilation Barges, a Canoptic Spider, make sure you don't get scammed by T-Suns people, 3 Doomsday Arcs, and a Trarch Stalker. Stealth Scout is great. It helps the army get out of that traffic block, get engaged in playing the game a little bit faster, which is great. It's definitely one of the limitations of Detachment is that it can traffic block itself. It's why I like things with Fly and things with Scout that can get on the board a little bit more aggressively. Playing multiple Trarch Stalkers, they might get their legs stuck in each other, but playing 1 Stalker, 2 Annihilation Barges, you've got Fly, you can get over the top, play the game. And then you've got, your 2 Flayed One units and your Scorpic Destroyers and your Scorpic Lord who can go and solve problems behind walls, as well as the Silent King and the Command Barge who are not bad at it necessarily. It just gives you an absolute insane amount of flexibility. Very, very powerful. Shoots really hard. There is no way this is the perfect Starshatter list. We are very early in experimentation with a new detachment that is one of the best in the game, and we will see where this shakes out over the course of really, really good Necron players getting their teeth stuck into this. This is kind of the best of the first wave that I've seen. So yeah, big fan of Starshatter. I think it's really powerful. I have it up here, top right. 5 stars for power, 5 stars for interesting. It gives you flexibility to play whatever kind of game you want, and it's really damn good at doing it. And what else could that be but 5-star power, 5-star interesting? Now, there is obviously the third axis that I don't have here of good for the game. It's going to get a 1 star on that one for me, but I don't want to focus on that right now. Like, I think, there's going to be enough of that on every other piece of content and every other show. If you want to play Starshatter, this is why it's good. This is what you should be looking at. If you want to beat Starshatter, these are the things you have to be thinking about. And that's, for me, what I'm going to try to leave it on. As much as I want to sit here and whine and moan about Starshatter being in the game and bad for, it's not useful, right? Nobody needs to hear that right now. If you want to play Starshatter, here is some direction. If you want to beat Starshatter, here is some direction. Okay, now we move on to day 7 of 8. Oh, I'm nearly done. That's nice to hear. It's a slightly longer one because we have Index Deathwatch and also Blackspear Task Force. So let's start with the Index. So my notes on the Index are broadly that there's a ton of new data sheets that are old data sheets. There's loads of free strat access. The Watchmaster has a different free strat to the Captain, which means that you can use both of them in the same turn, which is really cool. So you can have like double kill team stratagems, and then the kill team stratagems are free if you are, if you can use them on 2 units instead of 1. So you can have like a bunch of. I actually don't remember if that one stuck around for the kill teams. It did not. Okay, that's a shame. But you can site-to-site teleport with 2 units for 1 CP now, or you can do adaptive tactics with 2 units, and then you can do rounds on 1 unit for 0, and then have it on another one for 0 for stat. So loads of access to free stratagems. It really does give you really good CP economy with this detachment. You don't have a character that gives you +1 CP like Marnus Calgar or Azrael, but you do have lots of free strat access, which is great. All your bolters for the Deathwatch specific units got a little bit better. Mostly what that manifested as is +1 AP and lethal hits. But if you are specifically a Deathwatch heavy bolt rifle or heavy bolter, you get +1 damage as well, which means the Indomitor kill team has damage 2 bolt rifles and damage 3 heavy bolters, which with lethal hits and AP2 base, which is fantastic. That data sheet is really, really interesting. And also, Marines, since the Primarisification, generally don't have mixed arms units anymore. Like, the aggressors are kind of the only one, and like company heroes are kind of, right? Like, there are a few things that are kind of mixed arms. Deathwatch veterans are a unit that shoots and fights, and there is no 2 ways about it. That is a thing that you don't really get in Space Marines outside of a couple specific things. Like Deathwatch, like regular Terminators aren't that, but there are Deathwatch kill teams, there are Deathwatch Terminators, there are the Deathwatch veterans themselves, right? These all do multiple things without just having a character, and you can add a character to enhance the direction you want, and that makes these data sheets very, very multidimensional in a book that doesn't really have that anymore. Like, it's not really a thing. The Redemptor Dreadnought is maybe the only other comparison. So I think that does give you like a genuinely really interesting amount of flexibility in Index Deathwatch. The data sheets that I really wanted to pull out were the Deathwatch Terminators. You get 3 heavy weapons and 2 melee weapons. So you can have 3 Cyclone Missile Launchers or Assault Cannons, and then 2 Thunderhammer Stormshield Terminators as Blood of Wounds. It's a lot of shooting coming out. I believe they have the kill team keyword as well. So they can use the stratagems a bit more efficiently. And then they get reroll charges, and they force battle shock tests when they charge, which is, the forcing battle shocks is never amazing, but if it'll shut down a fight first at roughly 25% rate, like that's better than a kick in the teeth if you are like in a pinch and you need to get bailed out, right? They have the flexibility to do that and like to solve a problem that maybe would have been difficult to solve otherwise. And they do have the kill team keyword, so you can use all the stratagems on them to, like, make those cyclo missilators anti-infantry 2+ with their 2d6 plus 3 instances of blast. So you're kicking out 12 bolter shots, 2d6 66 cyclo missilator shots, and 3 instances of blast. Shoot a squad of 20 guys in Green Tide, whatever. You're going to be kicking out, rough math, 21 plus 12 for blast plus 12 base, 30, 45 shots, hitting on threes, potentially threes rerolling, and then winning on twos. Like, that's a ton of firepower out of a unit that is fairly innocuous and is only 180 points and is okay in combat with 3 power fists and 2 thunderhammers. Like, I like this unit. I think it's genuinely quite good. Deathwatch veterans, like I said, are mixed arms. You have access to the frag cannons, the heavy thunderhammers being 10-2-3. They've got reroll ones to hit naturally, or reroll all hits if you're fighting non-Imperium chaos units, so anything Xenos shaped. Generally pretty good. They benefit quite well from characters. They take buffs well, sustained hits and lethal hits from the Black Spear Task Force or any of the Gladius stratagems, anything like that. They just, they receive buffs well. Indomitor kill teams, I think, are very similar. They're sort of the more shooty version of the Gravis kill team. You're looking, I think the general is probably going to be something like 5 heavy intercessors with 2 heavy bolters, 3 eradicators with a multi-melta, and then 2 aggressors with the flamestorm, with the power gauntlets. They get +2 strength. The bolter gauntlets, they get +2 strength if they're shooting the closest target, +2 strength if they charge. They take characters well. If you want to give them like an apothecary biologist or a captain for free strat or lethal hits, like, they already have lethal hits on a lot of their shots, but not all of them. It gives them melee lethal. They are reasonably expensive. 270 points is not cheap, but you are getting 30 wounds of toughness 6. Which is a lot of beef with lethal hits, a lot of shots. The melt is going to strength 11. Again, like, it's the same kind of math we talked about with the X-Screen. That's effectively +2 to wound against toughness 10 vehicles, which is a lot of what you're going to be firing this unit at if they're the closest target. I'm going to quickly check if that's closest per model or per unit, because you could definitely do some interesting things there with, like, I'm going to put my 3 aggressors closest to this vehicle. Each time a model in this unit makes a range attack that costs. So you could do something like, okay, I'm going to put these 3 eradicators in front of that tank that's toughness 10. They're going to be close to that guy, and then all these anti-infantry firepower is going to go next to that guy and next to this squad, and then I'm going to split, and these guys are all close to that vehicle, so I get +2 to wound there. These guys are all close there, so I get +2 to strength there, and these are all close to there, so I get +2 strength there. And suddenly you're just shredding people with strength 7 and strength 11 firepower and strength 6 from the bolters, and then you're charging in with a couple power fists on top of that, and like strength 6 melee, and you're still Space Marine, so you've still got potentially mission tactic sustained hits and Ultha moment, and you're causing a lot of problems with a unit that is pretty durable and that can teleport with the Black Spear Task Force detachment. Or Vanguard Space Marines, or Advance and Charge and Advance and Shoot with Gladius, whatever. And then the Talon Strike kill team is the other one. It's jump pack intercessors and the Inceptors. It means you can run 5 Inceptors with plasma, and they get +1 to wound when they are, or +1 to AP when they arrive from reserve. That works in Vanguard. That works in Black Spear. It means they can have AP 3 assault bolt rifles if you have any +1 AP stratagem, AP 2 otherwise, and AP 4 and AP 5 on the plasma. They will rip. You can run like a plasma pistol sergeant to have some upload of wounds for hazardous, which is quite nice, and they're T6. And then the jump back intercessors help you punch your way out of a wet pepper bag in combat. And then, yeah, again, you're a kill team, which means you can use the kill team stratagems for, anti-infantry 2+ if you're trying to kill custodial wardens, or you can use, +6 range to get them up to range 24. Like, lots and lots of flexibility. Really cool data sheet. Expensive at 290, but they can have attached characters. Like, I like them. I don't know if I love them. There's not one in the build that we're going to be talking about, but yeah, I think the Talon Strike kill team is definitely one of those ones that I would like to see explored, and that I will be trying out myself if I get the opportunity to play some Deathwatch in the future. Now, Black Spear Task Force itself, you're looking at kill team strat efficiency, right? There's a bunch of stratagems that are like pick up a unit, or pick up 2 if it's kill team, or put a unit in mission tactics, or 2 if they're kill teams. And I think that's just really, really good, especially when we're talking about all those free strats earlier. This detachment just gets a ton of access to making its CP go a little bit further than everybody else's. It gives you movement and damage, which is not a thing that a ton of Marine data sheets outside of specific Gladius give you. Stormlance gives you a lot of movement. It doesn't give you a lot of damage, right? There's a +1 to wound strategy, but no +1 AP. This detachment has sustained hits, lethal hits, anti-infantry, +1 AP, ignore cover, like, really, really, really powerful tools for different situations. Not as much in the melee sense, so there's no land stratagem here, but it does give you a lot of flexibility, and I think that's really interesting. Thief of Secrets is a messed up enhancement. It's +1 to 3 combat stats. I believe it's strength, AP, and damage, but I'm going to verify that because reading is easy. Yeah, strength, damage, and AP by 1, and then if you kill a unit, model, you get 2 to them instead, which means if you put this on a captain in a assault intercessor squad, you go to strength 9, AP 3 damage 3, which then you can get +3 attacks, go to your your 8 attacks, and then get your devastating wounds, probably kill something, and then for the rest of the game you're just strength 10, AP 4, damage 4, which is a absurd number even when you don't have devastating wounds. Just will mean devastating wounds to most things that do not have a 2-up armor save or armor attempt or an invulnerable save, and then that unit becomes an absolute blender for the rest of the game if you can keep it even a little bit safe, and it can even teleport about the board if you want. And again, it's another user of that free strat, so you can throw sustained hits on them if once they're out of their transport. You can armor content with them for free. Yeah, just gives you a lot of direction. I think that's a really, really powerful data sheet, and I have it specifically pulled out in K data sheets. There's also some cool stuff you can do with like a Gravis Captain who gets slightly more attacks based because he has the extra attacks which benefit from all the buffs that aren't attack based, which none of those are. You can end up with like 7 sword attack, like 5 power fist attacks and 2 sword attacks, all of which are getting +2 to strength, damage, and armor penetration. Stick it in a Indomitor kill team, get that +2 strength in the charge. Suddenly you're going in with your power fist at strength 11, and then once you've killed a model, it goes to strength 12, and you're suddenly AP 4 threatening vehicles on 4s, or vehicles on land raiders on 4s and regular vehicles on 3s, which is very, very threatening under the right circumstances. The other thing I want to call out here, you do not get scouts in Black Spear Task Force. Scouts are one of the best data sheets in Space Marines. They shore up your scoring game. They are teleporting, they are infiltrating, they are scouting, they just do everything. And this detachment doesn't get them. So you kind of have to shore up your scoring game in other ways. You have to, you're using the teleportation stratagem to get things around the board because you don't have it naturally. Now, there's a world where you consider something like a Calatus Assassin in here to like shore that up yourself. The direction I've gone is putting more other scoring units in the list. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, the last kind of thing I want to talk about is Centurion Devastators. They are great in this detachment. The ability to teleport is fantastic, and there are 2 very relevant shooting buffs. You have the lethal hits and the sustained hits. That unit has full hit reels against you to some objectives, and that means that they can really make use of those. You have detachment like Vanguard that really sing off of those. This stratagem just gives them deep strike naturally, so you don't need your real Ventress. So yeah, Centurion Devastators are like your one-stop, pick up, solve a problem, go away. They are 100 points more expensive than the reasonable kill teams that are in the same place, like Indomitors, but I struggle to not want to bring one. I could definitely see lists that don't run them, but for my mileage, they seem like Black Spear Task Force is the place to play Centurions for me that isn't Vanguard, and it's about as good as Vanguard is using them. They're a little less defensive, a little more offensive. Sustained hits is often going to be better than +1 to hit and +1 AP, because you can get +1 to hit from other sources, and then the +1 AP often bounces into invulnerable saves against a lot of targets, or isn't super relevant because you're overkilling anyway. But you gain the ability to split fire and do more durable targets with invulnerable saves, all that kind of thing. Really, really big fan. Love them in this detachment. Let's have a quick look at the list. So I wrote up a Black Spear Task Force list. I would definitely, there was a world where I'm writing Gladius lists for this army and things like that, but I wanted to focus on Black Spear purely for the sake of time and sanity. So I have Watchmaster with Tome of Ectoclades, which is the double oath, Captain with Power Fist, Thief of Secrets, 10 Deathwatch veterans who will be attached to the Watchmaster, who gives them advance in charge, and then the free strat, a Rhino to put them in, 5 Assault Initiatives with an Impulsor for the Captain with Power Fist, 2 squads of Deathwatch Terminators with the aforementioned Cycle Missile Launchers Thunderhammer loadout, durability and output for 180 points. What would you not, and damage, what would you not love? 6 Centurion Devastators with the last cannon missile loadout, an Indomitor kill team for that teleportation and the close range target killing, and like kill team efficiency, right? Like if you're going to be able to use this strat on 2 kill teams, you might as well have 2 kill teams to use it on. Sometimes you're going to pick up the Watchmaster and the Indomitor kill team, or a Deathwatch kill team and them. Like just great, really nice to have access to. 5 Infiltrators, 2x5 Incursors. I think Incursors are my first step for scoring units in this detachment. They give +1 to hit against the target for shooting, so you can point click and have the Indomitor kill team hitting on 2s, which makes it much easier to fish with Oath of the Moment. And they can help the Deathwatch veterans with the Cycle Missile Launchers, or the Deathwatch veterans with the frag cannons, the Deathwatch Terminators with the Cycle Missile Launchers. And then they still have scouts, so you're still able to get like access to that midboard that you wouldn't have otherwise with not having scouts. And I have 1 Invader ATV with a multi-melta because points. 60 points doesn't buy a ton in Deathwatch. I really tried to fit that 3rd Terminator squad in, but I just couldn't make it fit with the other stuff I wanted. If you find a way to make it work without, like significant compromise in the army, I would love to hear it. So yeah, drop that in the comments if you figure it out. But yeah, that was kind of the idea I had. And if the Indomitor kill team ends up just not being very good, it would not be hard to replace it with the 3rd Terminator squad and another, like an upgrade in the Invader ATV to like another unit, or like some scoring, things like that. Like, yeah, it could be really interesting. But yeah, big fan of the Black Spear Task Force. I think it's maybe not as good as the original Index Incarnation, like the very broken one where you could use it on Desolation stratagems of Desolation and stuff like that. But it's a very, very good compromise, and I like it a lot. Ooh, 1 second. So I have Deathwatch here, sort of between Death Guard and Lion's Blade. I think it's a bit more powerful and a bit more flexible and a bit more interesting. I don't think it's as good or as interesting as the Death Guard. I don't think, for me, I think it opens up some interesting directions, but it's kind of still the same Deathwatch we always had, just a little bit of a spin on it. And for me, it lacks the novelty. But if you have not seen Deathwatch before, I could definitely see this being like an absolute star of a detachment for you. So I have a what 3.5, 4 out of 5 for interesting, and 3.5 out of 5 for power. I do think it is not going to be as good as Ultramarine Gladius. I don't think it's going to be as good as Dark Angels Gladius or Stormbound Space Wolves, but it is still a very, very compelling detachment, and I would love to. Really look forward to seeing this play, and I'm sure it will be completely viable at tournament top tables. Okay, we have 2 more. Oh, I'm really starting to feel it now. So we have day 8. This is today's detachments. We've had these for less than 12 hours at the time of recording. We have the Veiled Blade Elimination Force, which maybe has the most obvious key data sheets of all time. It makes your load-bearing lone operatives even more load-bearing. The strats are pretty good. The strats work very well for all Imperial Agents units, but even better on Assassins for a lot of them. They have the heroic stratagem. It's only 1 CP. I had to double check and be like, wait, really? I think that stratagem is fantastic, and it's not bad just because it's an Imperial Agents. The fact that you can charge out of sequence and then your Calidus even get +1 to wound if it does. Yeah, it's really good on Subductor squads. It's really good on Imperial Navy Breacher squads. Just get OC on points and blow your opponent's units while they try to stop your primary. I think that's a pretty good thing to have access to. I think it's fairly interesting and reasonably strong. The unfortunate thing for me, like the assassins becoming a 600 point brick of your army if you want to run all 4 of them, and I feel like you kind of have to emotionally. Maybe that's not correct. I think there's a world where you argue you still don't run the Vindicare or the Colexus, because the Colexus upgrade. The Colexus becomes a very expensive detachment. The grenade on the 3-up, like if it adds 1 mortal wound to it once or twice a game, but costs 40 points on a character that already doesn't really do a ton. I don't know if I love the idea of that. The decoy targets on the Calidus is fantastic. Being able to teleport her about and then like get a charge off from very close means suddenly an area of the board that didn't have a ton of melee in it can very quickly have a Calidus assassin there. The Eversor getting to free heroic, free counteroffensive, and then also reactive charge with the 1 CP stratagem is really, really cool. I really like that. Yeah, there's just some generally pretty good stratagems here, right? Like you've got +1 toughness, plus for a Philippine for an Eversor, pretty good on Subductor, pushing out to toughness 4 for a vulnerable save. Like they won't die to a stiff breeze at that situation. You've got the sustained hit stratagem that also give the Calidus damage 3. Like some just really, really interesting tools here to like make the most of what is you're still playing agents, right? That's kind of the problem. The key data sheets here are definitely the assassins. They're the thing you're playing the top for. So I have all 4 on my list. Again, I'm not 100% sure if that's correct, but it felt like it was right. So I took it in the spirit that it was given and tried my best to build a list around that. So let's very quickly have a jump over to that because it's yeah, it's pretty solid. I actually quite like the list. Like in principle, I feel like it answers a lot of questions. So you have Calidus, Colexus, Vindicare, Eversor with all of their upgrades. These are just all of their upgrades. Specifically, it's the redeploy anywhere on the board as long as you kill a model. Green on a 3+, and if you kill any monster 4+, he'll still roll a 1 to hit on the Vindicare, and then the free heroic and fight interrupt on the Eversor. We have 3 Rogue Tyranid who'll be joining 3 Imperial Navy Breachers, just durable unit to use that charge stratagem. They've also got like reasonable guns. They get full wound rerolls. They're just a nickel and dime damage unit that have got some decent ability to play around the board. Got 3 squads of Subductors because the 4 vulnerable save and decent body means they're very good at bullying primary. They've also got a battleshock ability that can help them flip objectives if you charge onto them. A squad of Tenses to battle with an Immolator, split them up, get some sticky objectives on the board, an Immolator dropping about and stripping some cover, and then Canis Rex because it kind of feels like you have to. Canis Rex could definitely be like 2 Deathwatch kill teams. I feel like Canis Rex answers specifically different problems and maybe gives your opponent something to focus on besides killing your lone operatives in their backfield, because it kind of feels like what you're here for is making your lone operatives do their thing. And if you're not doing that, like what are you here for? In terms of power level, I had a tough time gauging this one. I don't rate agents in general, and I don't think this detachment is better than Fleet. And I don't think Fleet is very good just in general. So I am sure I'm going to lose this in a tournament, but I'm going to give it a 1 star for power. Yeah, I think I feel like if the assassins were like the upgrades were optional, maybe I would be happier with it because I could just run like the Colexus without it. Because it feels like a lot of the upgrades are going to be hard to use twice because they're kind of on one-way trips. That's kind of what I got, and you're paying another 160 points to have the 4 of them, and I don't know if I want that. That's the difficulty for me. So yeah, but I am going to give it I give it a 3.5 stars for interesting because yeah, it's pretty interesting. It opens up a completely new direction of having your load bearing load operatives be even more load bearing, but it does a decent amount with a very small suite of tools for Imperial Agents, and it does have genuinely good stratagems. And again, that charge out of phase stratagem is maybe the best stratagem in the game, and it's here for 1 CP instead of 2. It's maybe. I don't I choose to believe it's not because emotionally I can't handle it. But that stratagem is really good. And this detachment is really bad. But is that stratagem good enough to get you over the line? Look, I would not be shocked if this won a GT. I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't be shocked. Let's go with that. I'm gonna stick with that, and I'm using that and I'm sticking with it. I'm probably wrong, but it'll be fine. I can live with that. All right, last up, we have the Solar Spearhead for Custodes. This is vehicles that hold ground. You don't hold ground with vehicles, but Custodes said, well, what if we got +2 OC until you do damage to us? And they're Custodes vehicles, so they don't really take damage. And then what if they got reroll ones when they did, and then reroll ones to wound when they're below half to make sure that they didn't even feel like they were degrading because they're probably still running around doing karate flips because apparently Custodes Dreadnoughts know karate, and Caladius is too. And the Dreadnoughts all get +2 to move and +1 to advance and charge, so they're good out of reserve, they're good on the table, they're just fast and speedy, and they're not good data sheets. By and large, in general, the 4 Custodian Dreadnoughts, the 3 Contender variants, 2 from Forge World, and the Telemon are not very good. But this detachment avoids the thing that I said about Tyranid Warriors, which is that it doesn't have a detachment rule, and it makes the data sheets good, because it makes the data sheets good, soft good, and then also has a detachment rule, which is the +2 OC, the real ones to hit and the ones to wound once you take damage. That's Crusher Stampede with a side grade. I like that. I think that's kind of cool. I think that's better. I think that's interesting. It opens up a new playstyle of vehicles bullying with OC. It also gives you character dreadnoughts, which is, as a Iron Hands enjoyer, my favorite thing to hear, and it's almost got me being like, maybe I like to Telemons. It has a lot of rules as well. Like I was surprised how many kind of just generally things there were that this detachment did. You've got a +1 strength and damage for a dreadnought. Once you got a Philippine for a dreadnought that's -1 damage, and toughness 10 with the 2 up armor 4 vulnerable save. You've got walk through walls for dreadnoughts and bikes. You've got strength higher than toughness minus 1 to wounds, so you don't just get scammed by a vindicator. You've got fight on death. You've got D3+3 piling consolidation. It's not, or D3+3 pile in only. It's not as good as 6-inch piling consolidation, but it's going on a dreadnought and not 20 poxwalkers. That's compelling. And then ignore modifiers and ignore covenant for Caladius is just absurd. That data sheet's already one of the best in the game, and I think this detachment pushes it to being like top 5. I don't know. I don't want to stick to that, but it makes the Caladius very, very powerful, even more so, right? Pushing that thing to OC 6 and then reroll wanting to hit someone when you want to take that OC off it. A Deathwing Knight squad doesn't take the objective off it until it does damage to it, at which point it goes, cool, now I hit on 2 rerolling ones. Okay, thank you for trying. That's obnoxious. There's also an enhancement for fallback and shoot that you can stick onto like a blade champion that you can then put next to the Caladius and then fall back with it and then shoot those Deathwing Knights in the face with your guns. That's just cool. This detachment. I have the other thing with this detachment. We saw at WCW that Custodes don't really need their rules to do good work. Their data sheets are powerful already. This does it make them better than a reactive move in Talons of the Emperor or crit 5s in Shield Host? Like, no, maybe not, right? But it does bring other things up to nearer their power level. There are more things you can justify running that are not Wardens and Blade Champions and Caladiuses now. And I think that opens up a ton of direction for Custodes in a different way. And the list that I've written is not going to make you think that I think that, because I tried to write a list that I was like, if I was taking this seriously and going to take it to a tournament, how would I approach if I was like playing this detachment? But there is a direction where you just play like 6 dreadnoughts and you're just like having a great time with it. And I could absolutely see that. And I think it's amazing that that's a viable playstyle. Seeing Crusher Stampede Territed list on the board has been incredible recently with the change to that attachment. And I think this is very capable of being the Custodes version of that. But the list that I wrote tried to kind of be, okay, what if I just played the 2 best things I can do with this, which I think for me is a +1 strength and damage Telemon with fists and a +1 strength and a 5-up field obeying Telemon with fists. They just become 2 things that can hold ground very well. They're high OC. They get rerolls once they take damage. And until they take damage, they're very durable and they're not going to be sitting behind walls mostly. And then, they can walk through walls. They can go and really, really, really threaten things. And then they can advance and charge as well, which just makes them, the threat of going 2 CP, walk through walls, advance and charge with 2 dreadnoughts that are very hard to kill. One of which hits like a goddamn freight train at strength 13, damage 4. And the other one which hits pretty damn hard at strength 12, damage 3, with, again, sustained hits because of Kataz, and they get extra attacks because of the Talmud status got an update. If you run 2 of them, you get more benefits on them now. That seemed pretty good to me, which is kind of like the broad strokes I went with. Okay, well, what if we just replace the third Warden brick with, 2 of these and, make some minor tweaks otherwise? And for me, that feels like the direction that's the safest. So that's kind of what I have here, right? It's 2 Telemons, one with the Feel No Pain, one with the +1 damage, 2 Blade Champions, 2 squads of 5 Wardens, 1 squad of Custodian Guard with Draxus, 2 Caladius with Blaze Cannons, and 2 squads of Prosecutors. It's just the good data sheets in Custodes, and then support it with good stuff. I would really like to find 10 points in this list to have the fallback and shoot enhancement. I could not quite make it fit. There's also a world where you could just play the reroll ones to hit and wound enhancement on one of the dreadnoughts instead, so that you have reroll ones to hit one on your blade champions or on bikes, something like that. I think there is a ton of direction you could take this attachment. It's really interesting, but this is the thing that I think if I was going to take it to a tournament, this is probably what I would play. Is it entirely in the spirit of the detachment? No, but I didn't write. I tried writing the other list, and I looked at it and I was like, this is probably not just better than playing 10 Wardens, so I didn't want to be disingenuous in what I said was my idea of the best thing you can do with this detachment as it currently stands with the context of no data slate. And that kind of brings me on to the last part, which is the final review of that, which is Custodes. I have them sitting here in this cluster. 4-star power, 4-star, interesting. It opens up a ton of direction. It's not the best thing in the game. I don't think it's broken. I think it's just powerful. And for me, that gets 4-star. It's really hard to put anything like higher than that because I'm looking at them in comparison to Starshatter, and they're not Starshatter, which is good. Now, the big thing that stands out to me here is that I think of the 9 sets of rules they've given us so far, I have 6 of them in that top corner where they are powerful and interesting, which is great. Are some of them, do I think Starshatter is maybe too powerful? Yeah, sure. But overall, I think they all give you a thing to do, and they say, here is a direction, go and try it, and have fun with it. And then I think the top left one for Imperial Agents, this one here, is where Imperial Agents probably should be, because it's not an army, it's a collection of data sheets. And they've done their best job of saying, here's a new and novel way to play that. And it's not that great, but it's fine. Thousand Suns, I hope they're getting a book soon, because that detachment's not good. And then Tyranids, I'm open to the idea that I'm sour grapes on this one because I don't like the Tyranid Warrior data sheet very much, and I don't think it's very good, and that I don't like this detachment because of that, and that it's probably maybe more interesting than I'm giving it credit for. But for me, it doesn't tick any of the boxes, and this is my data, my interesting, so I get to decide. And I've decided to be a curmudgeon about the Tyranids one. But there's a world where what I'm giving here is 7 enthusiastic passing grades, 1 unenthusiastic passing grade with the Tyranids, and then 1 see me after class with Hexwarp, which is the only one that I think is a miss from 9. And do I think Starshatter is a miss on power level? Yeah, it probably gets a failing grade on that, but that's not That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about interesting and powerful, and it's both. It genuinely is. It opens up, for better or worse, a ton of play pattern for Necrons. And I think every single one of those attachments, like I would say everything from above Lion's Blade is a new and genuinely, like anything in this like 4x4 grid, right? 3.5 stars and 3.5 stars in both is like genuinely one of the best things you can be doing in the game right now, right? Like anything above that is like you will at least be having fun, compelling games against almost everything you play against, and you are powerful and you are interesting, and you will be having a good time, and it is new and novel. And I think Lion's Blade misses the mark on both of those things a little bit by just being the same Space Marine stuff we've always been doing with a really good new stratagem, and also by not being Gladius, which knocks it down like half a point, which is maybe unfair, but definitely true. So yeah, for me, Grotmas so far, we are 9 sets in. We've got a full new index out of it. There's a brand new army in the game again with Deathwatch, which is really cool. I say brand new army, a brand new Space Marine supplement, which is really cool. And there are 7 really cool new interesting attachments, and 8 that will probably see tournament play, because I don't think people will not play Tyranid Warriors in tournaments. Yeah, I don't think we'll see a ton of Hexwarp. With that said, I hope this has been interesting. If you have any feedback on the format or on the cadence, anything that's been going on with this, please do leave a like, a comment, or subscription. But really, feedback in the comments would be really appreciated. If you're in the Discord and seeing this, please do chuck me a message in content destruction. If you're on the YouTube feed, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear what you guys think. What's interesting for you? What do you think of the lists? Any feedback on them? Did you guys like this format? I am very open to redoing the format for next week's. I'll be recording after a team event that I'm at, so I'll be coming back a bit later. It might be going out on the Monday instead of the Sunday, so I'll probably include that week's Monday one, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, any feedback is appreciated. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys got a ton out of this. And if you are interested in any of the detachments, you want to chat about them more, you want to get help from me or any other static coaches, but specifically me, come on, I did this. Drop us an email at coaching@stat-check.com, or drop me a message on Discord, or check out the website at stat-check.com/coaching. We'd love to hear from you if you're looking to grow as a player. We've got a data slate coming hopefully soon. I'm very much hoping we can be on data slate content next week. But yeah, with that all said, I hope everybody has had a fantastic time with this, and I will catch you on the next week's episode as I review the next 7 to 10 sets of rules that they've decided to make me suffer through. However, everyone has a good evening, and I'll catch you later.